Thank you again for your work. This team work that benefits everybody across the district, but it does take us away from family and friends. So I want to kind of acknowledge that. So with that, we can start with our committee updates. What we've been waiting for all week. Michelle, I know we have a meeting tomorrow, but I thought I would leave it on there just so you could, preview it.
Yeah, so we meet tomorrow, and our goals for tomorrow are to do another review of all of the rubrics. And then we are also doing a review of the process, and just to jog everyone's memory, our kind of intention or plan is to bring to professional council a recommendation to pilot the new appraisal in one high school, 2 middle schools, and 2 elementary buildings next year. And that way we can kind of work kinks out and decide if there's pieces that we want to adjust before we would then go into looking at adopting the new appraisal system district-wide in 26, right? We're in 25. So tomorrow night we'll work on getting the feedback and going through any of the edits on rubrics and process, and then hopefully be pretty close to getting to a final draft pilot proposal to bring. So
you did say feedback by end of the day Wednesday.
yes.
And it's not end of the day yet. I just said to you. But yeah, no. Good meeting.
Okay.
You remember clear back to this morning?
So once again, ECAF met this morning. We, at this point, I think, heard all of the new proposals that we're going to consider for this year. We now go through our process of kind of summarizing everything, ranking what's going to come out of that group to this body. But I think that we're still well on track to have a pretty good set of recommendations and plenty of time before we're able to talk about money anyway. So,
I think we're going to meet again in a couple weeks.
yeah, I think we scheduled another meeting for 2 weeks today.
Yep. Calendar. We met this had been a bit ago, and one of the things we talked about was the 25-26 calendar, which we went ahead and printed, since it's sometimes helpful to have the calendar in front of us. And Clint, would you mind kind of summarizing some of the challenges this calendar gave us and continues to give us?
Yeah, really, it has primarily because of where Memorial Day falls in 2026. If you've noticed over the last few years, Memorial Day has been creeping up by usually a day every year. And so Memorial Day falls on May 25th in 2026, next May. That's really early. Actually, if you look back and ahead, that is the earliest Memorial Day will fall for about probably the next 7 to 10 years. It usually doesn't get that far ahead and early in the month before it rolls back. And it does roll back the following year in 2027. It rolls all the way back to May 31st. So 6 more days to play with in there. And why Memorial Day, where that falls, is a challenge, and really has been challenging the last few years as it's creeped up. We've had enough wiggle room to make it work, to get enough calendar days in there between basically August 1st and Memorial Day to satisfy all the contracts, right? The 187-day contracts, new teachers. We ran into it a couple of years ago where we had talked about what is the possibility of bringing new teachers in before August 1st, maybe July 31st, July 30th. That's an expensive endeavor because you have to provide then a whole other month of benefits, which equates to a large sum of money. So kind of August 1st is that hard start date for new teachers, obviously, which then we work from there to Memorial Day, which works fine if Memorial Day is on May 31st, as it is in 2027. You've got lots of room in there with, the breaks and those types of things. As that creeped up, you became really short. And so we had to do some creative things in 25, 26 next year on this calendar, even with, you know, coming back a little earlier than normal, from winter break, doing some different things with some, even PD days, half day PD days, just to try and find enough calendar days, have enough contract days. And ultimately what we found was on this calendar that we currently have, there's 186 days, contract days. Obviously the contract for new teachers, I guess, is 170 or 187 days. So what we talked about is where would we be able to adjust to find that extra day to actually be able to fulfill the contract. And Angie can speak to it. We talked about a lot of different options, none of them probably ideal or would be popular, obviously. You know, we talked about back the day after Memorial Day or that after, so be on like next year, the 26th, or is it a day from break that we, one of the breaks, whether it's Thanksgiving break or winter break, to find that extra day somewhere. Someone, and I can't even remember who had the idea, but it might have been, yes, it was probably the, I guess, most palatable of all of the unpalatable options. And it was basically, and you jump at any time to address some of the feedback from
The
district
dialogue.
dialogue
I mean, yeah,
also.
one of the biggest pieces of feedback on professional development, with district dialogue, specifically about pre-service and about not having enough time, not like training time, but like time to set up room, all the things that we have to do. So I think one of this kind of addresses two concerns. One, nobody wants to argue against working 187 days because that's the contract. And two, we want more work time at the beginning of the year. So currently we have, of course, the 6th as that flex day prep time. So the suggestion, and then the committee, I think, was supportive of this as well. The suggestion would be that we would have 2 prep days at the beginning of the contract. So prep day number 1 would be August 5th, which notice on the calendar is currently only new educator pre-service. Okay, that would be the flex day, ed prep. And then what is now marked as our first professional day would actually be the second professional day, also ed prep, but on site. So that's the recommendation from the calendar committee. And I think it does address those 2 concerns in a way that kind of feels like we're listening, but also trying to make sure that we address the contract day number.
I would just add, as we've worked on the 26, 27 calendar, obviously we're going back to May 31st, provided a lot more flexibility in what we can do and where we can start and things. I guess allows us a more traditional schedule that we're used to.
So I think the remaining challenge that we have would still be our student contact time. And if you take a look at the days that we have, finding more opportunities for student contact time, I'm going to be honest, I'm struggling a little bit. The only time that I really can see that wouldn't be a major change would be that August 29th. We have a half day. Before that Labor Day weekend. But as you all know, the half days, the afternoon is PD. So really we'd be talking, we would be gaining a quarter of a day. Right? So the calendar committee didn't really have any like recommendations on that piece. Because I know that's some feedback I've been hearing a lot is, you know, I think we're still gonna have to wrestle with student contact time, and apparently our new norm is more snow days than we used to get. So I don't know if we have a fix for that issue right now, but being able to kind of put this calendar in front of you all again might spur some creative juices.
And I think in 26, 27, we talked about maybe some other things, and just where Memorial Day falls, we talked about some other options to claw back a few minutes here and there.
Right. And but in this calendar,
Yeah, this
It-
one's
it's a challenge. And I think it's just in terms of process, you know, we want to make sure that we have a calendar that aligns with what's in our contract. But my suggestion moving forward, just making sure that we can honor the process of professional counsel is that if our group decides that this is a solution to the issue that we have, that it be part of the larger package, just because it is part of the negotiated agreement. But you know, would love input on the content of the recommendation as well as the process as well. Because obviously people want this soon.
So if it's a part of the larger package, then that would not be official until we were done. and
It would be-
was
yeah.
Ratified, so.
Right, so the communication there is no doubt a challenge.
But I think the alternative of like a standalone MOU that says. But the only question is, do you want this year, next year to start one day or? Ineffective.
Yeah.
Option. Am I understanding right that then from a student contact perspective, we are one day tighter in this calendar than we were this year?
This is 169 if you add them up. It's usually 170.
And again, the only way to fix that is to reduce the,
For sure.
breaks.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you think about it, I mean, going into 2027, that's 6 days, that's it. And the alternative, we were squeezed at 6 days.
District no logs I took in and kind of reading through all of those comments. Felt like one of the PD days that got a lot of water, if you will, was that September 2nd, you know, the one that's really early on. Was there any discussion of making that a student contact day?
That would be, I mean, that I definitely, half days besides at the beginning end of quarter or semesters.
Right.
And that early PD day definitely had more feedback that was constructive.
Yeah.
So I think that could be a consideration. I'll be honest, in the calendar committee, we spent, I mean, the 7 a.m. meetings on Teams when high school starts at 7:40. We don't have a ton of time. So I pretty much, that whole calendar committee meeting was just focused on what we just talked
And
about.
motivation.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's one I think parents would appreciate as well, in terms of, you know, feeling like their kids just get into school and they turn around and think, oh gosh, they have a day off already.
Yeah,
You know,
after a
really.
half day at the beginning of the weekend, or the beginning, the beginning of the long weekend.
I think, I can't remember why that was there about 4 or 5 years ago. It used to be later in September. And yeah, there's a count. It goes along with our September 20th count, but Michael Flinthrope was on the, I think he was on the committee at that time, or shared it with someone on the committee. But because of the count day, especially for ELL, that professional day that week actually hurt us as far as count and funding.
Yeah.
And so I did confirm with him, however, checked with the state and got the date for the count day in 26, 27
Okay.
so we can look at if we want to move that
Moving that
back,
back.
do something different with it. That to stay off that.
The September date caused a problem with it, or when we had it?
When we had it later in
Oh.
September,
Oh,
because
gotcha.
then that PD day was during.
Just if there's a day off, typically that will split their attendance. If somebody's going to take a vacation or something,
They're gonna tag it.
they're gonna tag it, yeah, within the 4 days for those, so.
And
I think
actually,
that's
it
probably
was 26, 27 that I think September 20th actually falls on weekend. And so I asked them to check which week are they going to count the front or the back.
It isn't 25, because it's, the 20th is a Saturday. Would it be the 19th?
Probably. I think in 6, it's a Sunday. That was kind of the original rationale why. So we talked about it.
I agree with you too, Angie, the half days were definitely.
Oh, yeah. So I mean, I don't know. I know, let me back up and continue. When Jenna Cooter came and presented to us on the professional development calendar, for 25-26, which we didn't have time to kind of move forward to today, an incredible amount of time was taken looking at the feedback from district dialogue and really trying to pair, like, here's some new learning. And then the afternoon is like application implementation. And so one of the things that we talked about with, like, for example, this half day on the 29th is currently, since that's on the calendar as being a half day, she had that as part of that implementation time for a previous learning, if I remember correctly. So, you know, sometimes trying to fix an issue addresses, you know, messes up another plan. So I'm reluctant to try to, oh, this is the easy fix on this because everything is so interrelated.
Yeah, and I think a lot of those. We looked at tackling them for 26.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't already kind of on the books
Yep.
of this.
Yep.
And,
Absolutely. So you can do more of a system-wide review.
correct.
Yeah.
And actually in this 25-26 calendar, one half day had already been eliminated just because we were short.
Oh,
Yeah.
Time. I think it was April, and that was a half day in
Yes.
April. And that was already. So Angie and I talked this afternoon, if this body is okay with that solution, we would talk about putting that in our, what folder do we call that?
It's on the agenda. Draft consensus.
Draft consensus.
Yes.
That's what it's called. Any other questions or I guess objections to that?
seems like it makes the most sense. Yeah.
Put it in the magic draft consensus?
Okay, we will do that, and we may have to kind of all put our thinking hats on, but, you know, we can think about like communication, because currently people look at the calendar and they think the first day that they may have to show up to work, if they're
Yeah.
using that flex day earlier in the summer would be the 7th. But assuming that is ratified and what have you, it's gonna be different, so we've got a little bit of a challenge on communication. But also an opportunity for people to understand negotiations a little better. So, there you go. Yeah, when you're talking about a whole bunch of bad options and then we end up with, right, or less.
Some patterns that people are pretty used to.
Yep. Alright, conferences.
So we met before spring break and had some really good discussion just about what our purpose, what our charge was, what our focus wanted to be. And essentially we came up with, we all had anecdotal, this is what people are feeling about conferences, but we have no hard data to base any decisions on. So formulation of a survey is the next step. We all talked about keeping it short, simple, easy to collect data, thumbs up, thumbs down kind of questions. And then the next steps moving forward, like I said, that was right before spring break. So just meeting again, I think our date is in April, the April 14th, I believe. And just formulating the questions and putting it in a way that we can send it out to folks, get responses.
Julie, did you
Yes.
guys talk about, I'm assuming you're talking about survey for staff.
Yes.
Has there been any discussion of some way to gather feedback or survey from parents? Because that's half the equation.
Yeah, for sure. There also, one of the questions that I had is like, I feel like those questions have been asked in parent surveys in the last few years. Is there a way to get that data from those surveys?
They, our community been asked about.
I think there was,
I don't remember. I just feel like there was like this community stakeholder, and maybe that was more based on stuff that was coming forward. But if not, then that's something that I don't know is appropriate coming from us. That might be a bigger thing.
but I think maybe if somebody wanted to pose some questions,
Mhm.
added to the district survey.
Yeah,
That would
okay.
be a good thing to talk about.
Definitely, yeah.
And maybe so that they are relatable to the questions we
Mhm.
ask the staff too. The other thing I might add on conferences is, if you've watched the board meeting this year, we
Mhm.
talked about this a couple times, just, and you all are aware of the change, especially for secondary, middle, and high school, of how we collected data.
Mhm.
Of course, it was a disaster with the way conferences panned out, right? Being rescheduled 3 times. But really, the way the data was, to your point of moving forward with any reliable data or any
Mhm.
data that you would make decisions on, right?
Yeah.
The data that had been collected, obviously, if the parent or guardian, came in, and we know that especially at the high school level or middle school level, to get around to see all 7 teachers, most don't. And so, if they only came to see 2 of their 7 teachers,
Mhm.
well, it would show up as 38% attendance, right? Or
Mhm.
30-some% attendance, which probably isn't reflective of what we really want to know. Because back in the day, when parents came and picked up a hard schedule, that family was marked off. And so then the data was simply the number of students that had someone come in for at least one conference counted. So probably more accurate data, reflective data, that there was engagement there with a parent or guardian.
Yeah.
Versus it looks artificially low, I think, just the way we were reflecting data. So the way we did it this spring, whereas if a student had anyone come in for even one conference, obviously that student was counted, that family was counted, and then it was just the number of students that had at least one conference divided by the total number of students in the school, which is probably more accurate
Mhm.
data to have, which would have been great if we probably rescheduled 3 times.
Right.
And obviously affected the attendance. So I think the plan would be to do that same data collection in the fall and probably have a much more accurate picture of
Mhm.
how many we're actually getting there,
Yeah.
especially at the secondary, middle school, high school level. So
Mhm.
that would be some, I think,
Yeah.
very valuable,
Definitely.
and probably more accurate data.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, and Rick, you can jump in on this too, I think the members of the committee were very aware that this is not like a quick, we're
Yeah.
coming up with something for next year sort
Yeah.
of situation. That it was expressed like, we would rather do this slower but thorough and think of all the factors
Yeah.
and moving parts and pieces to have something more formalized put together. That's where we left off. Yeah.
Couldn't remember if we had this since last time we met. Yeah, because we last time we talked about the on-site.
Yeah.
Okay, clinics. Look at that, we're done with committees and sports. Did I miss any committees? All right. We've all been waiting for. I'm logged
Are
in.
you logged in? Here?
Perfect.
Much as I. That would be comical. It's the. There we go. All right, so. I have to do this old thing where I have to read here, but look through this, you can't see very well. So, and I apologize. I have a first world problem. I can't hear on my left ear very well because I have a bunch of wax and water in my ear and swimmer's ear for 5 days. So I feel like you have you have your AirPods in all the time and you're talking this way. So I look a little bit off. There you go. So, oh, and I forgot to hand.
Oh, throw it in that.
You did have hard copies. In case you like them here, just pass around to a clip. And I'll let those go around. So we're gonna have 2 policies that we want to bring forward tonight. And what you're gonna have, and I'll just put up the red line version probably up here. But you're gonna have 3 versions of each policy in front of you. One is just the current version. I'll wait for it to get around here. And then there's a red line version, which shows the changes, and a tracked version, and then the proposed policy. So, and I'll go ahead and do the first one. The first one I'm going to talk about is the non-resident student enrollment. And that is, I'm just going to put up the red line just to see it. Hopefully that goes up. This. Oh, no, probably not. Not that. Right here. Rest. Wow, there we go. This is like the eye doctor. All right, so really this is one of these policies that we felt like definitely have a shared interest with. As currently worded, this allows the students of teachers, of educators to attend school in the district. Currently, the way it's worded, the policy requires the employee to work in Kansas, reside in Kansas, excuse me. Can work in Kansas, but reside in a different state. So it'd be Missouri. The changes here would basically remove that requirement that the employee reside in Kansas. So the really where that first sentence is where it specifically mentions that. So we would propose taking that out. And then the last, well, it used to be J, has a bunch of verbiage again about continuously reside in Kansas. So that would be language you take out as well. The rest of it is just me getting a little bit anal. I did find, I believe, a typo, I think, on B. Had a V, the custody of the employee, but so that is what that one is. Do not know the history as much about why it was specifically only in Kansas. I think it dealt with funding. And our funding guy couldn't be here tonight, Mr. Hutchison, but in general, I don't believe that's much of a concern anymore. I believe that the state provides full funding for those students. So maybe that was a concern in years past, but
So that is GBZE-C.
I have a couple
Yeah.
questions. One is probably super relevant, one is maybe tangential. In the first paragraph, it specifically refers to grades K through 12. What about our early childhood?
Yep. I wonder about that too.
Yeah.
And I opened that up. I almost changed that to pre-K. What I didn't know, and this is just me thinking
Right.
on jet lag sleep, lack of sleep, was if a child is pre-K, is there some, I guess I'm thinking through Head Start, I'm thinking through some, if there's different programming for pre-K kids. I don't necessarily there would, that's where my mind went initially, like, why wouldn't that be pre-K? If there was some reason, no. That would be, yeah, answer your question, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I didn't know if there was a reason why it was that.
I
way.
think we maybe wanna look into it a little bit,
Yeah.
just from the angle of pre-K could encompass a lot of different of those, you know, pre-K programs.
Yeah.
It could be Head Start, which I do think would probably
I just
not
don't,
necessarily
yeah,
be applicable for this policy.
yeah,
And then some others where there's a process for being able to be a part of the pre-K
Right.
program.
yeah. That was what came to my mind.
Yeah.
Who would be John? Maybe
Yeah.
that's or
And
Kim
then
Hawkins?
Kim,
Kim Hawkins.
yeah, maybe connect with them.
Does the new open enrollment like statute only apply K through 12? It does.
Yeah.
That's true.
And it makes me wonder, knowing that's how it was written previously.
Right.
If there wasn't a reason
There's
why
no
it
reason that we
was
can
written, that, you know, so we can.
And the tangential question is, obviously here being in agreement, it references licensed certified employees. Do we have a similar policy for our classified staff?
We do,
Okay.
we do.
Yeah.
That's, yeah, assuming the board would agree, we propose the board change that.
And that was in, since it's K through 12, would it apply if an employee has students who are in like?
The South Lake T. Those letters are close.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have to look at that.
Yeah.
Could ask them.
Yeah.
Now that I think you're getting an ID.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
Yeah. That's
Especially
both-
right now.
Both good questions, yeah.
And I appreciate a person that wants to fix capitalization errors.
Yeah, well, it's a pet peeve of mine. Generally, if you refer to the district, I should try to have a capital D,
Mhm.
but you know, it's not always that way.
We gotta let things go.
We gotta go. Sometimes they say school district. Anyway, that's that one. No more questions. I can move on to the next, which is classes.
Here, you can't see.
Oh, I know, this is rough. This is rough. I'm getting old. So this, this next one is drug-free schools. So I'm gonna pull that up here. It's GBZCG. Again, I just pulled up the red line. And that probably is a little too much there. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so I just kind of go from top to bottom, I guess. Really, there is a little bit of cleanup, and there's the paragraph regarding controlled substances, which you'll see there, I think are just typos. Someone got a little crazy with an and symbol. And in their defense, citing statutes is confusing. I feel like every time I did. Looking through those, I wanted to make sure they're still accurate, because I'm always hesitant to have statute numbers in there, because the legislature tomorrow could go in and change the law, and they need to be accurate still, which is good. And I know there was talk about whether marijuana would be a controlled substance or not. I think it still is there. So, and again, we have some of my anal attentiveness on capitalizing district. Kind of go to the second page. Really, I found maybe Michelle, I refer to as the Human Resources Division. Seem right? Or I don't know if we put Human Resources Department or just Human
We usually
Resources
or
Department.
Human resources.
Okay. Again, that one of those I caught as I was reading through it. And then the third from the bottom paragraph is really the only substantive change, I think, and this policy gets specifically, if I understand it, specifically deals with, pertains to an employee is impaired while at work or believed to be impaired under drug or alcohol. And as currently worded, that employee has within 5 days, excuse me, to report to human resources that he or she's been, and that would just drop that to 24 hours, which matches a policy GAP, GAP, not the store, GAP, that has, again, a 24-hour period. It just matches it. And it kind of, I guess by having alignment kind of prevents confusion, frankly, and there. So that's really the only substantive change. The next to last paragraph, I think, as you can tell, again, it had GBI, the negotiated agreement. I think that's the discipline policy. So I put that name there. And then the last paragraph, it talks about shall be provided to all employees. I phrase that to be made available. I think those are available through HR or on their website. I think provided tells me like, so here you go, hands, that we're kind of in a different world now where not necessarily everything is in paper handed out. So that is those policies in a nutshell.
So I'm curious on this one is, let's say somebody is convicted on a Friday. So the 24 hours, that means they would have to notify HR in the day Saturday. So I'm wondering, I mean, I know we have a similar policy with arrest.
Yeah.
And obviously I'm not opposed to people needing to report that. I just want to make sure that we have something that is doable.
Yeah. It's a good question. I think really we're looking to the next business day. I mean, I think we can, or the ability of someone to be able.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of times trials do end on a Friday. I would think if we're in a situation in which an employee has gone to trial and been convicted, and the district had no knowledge of that, I think it's pretty far in between.
So I just pulled
Yeah.
up GAP. And
Yeah.
So I'm wondering on GAP, that's the duty to report policy. And it's the 24 hours, but it's of arrest, charges, or conviction. Should this match that or not necessarily?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't want to. I think GAP would cover this.
Okay.
But the fact that they had different things, so.
Just try.
But there was
to have
such a
one of it.
discrepancy.
Yeah.
Between 5 days and 24 hours. Yeah.
With the existence of wording in GAP up here too. Does this paragraph add anything?
I don't think it does, actually.
Wondering if it might be simpler to have language in one place rather than two.
I had a similar thought, Eric, when I was, maybe this paragraph just was taken out. I think
Or maybe make a reference to policy GAP.
You could.
so that
you could do that,
That might
yeah.
simplify it.
Yeah.
Then you don't have this confusion.
Yeah, I think if you read through as I was kind of familiarizing myself with the policy, it has a lot of good language
Yeah.
regarding, employees' rights to terms of search and suspicion, and which is all good language. And I feel like this paragraph doesn't kind of go with all that, it's, like I said, I think the odds of this paragraph ever coming into play, I can't imagine. for a lot of different reasons.
Policy about drug free schools.
Yeah, it tells, this policy as it reads to me deals more with an employee's right to, a Fourth Amendment right. You know, search and seizure, those kinds of things. Right to privacy, that kind of. And I don't know when it was adopted. And again, like I was, yeah, again, it talks about reasonable suspicion and those kinds of things. Again, initially, I was afraid that maybe the paragraph by controlled substance somehow had changed, but it had not. That appears valid there in terms of legally, so.
Do you think would it make sense just to refer to GAB? I was trying to think how you
I
reword
know.
that.
I mean, we could say, just, yeah, I'm at the third paragraph, any employee is convicted of a crime under a criminal drug or alcohol statute for a violation occurring while on duty must notify the superintendent or administrative designee as otherwise provided for in board policy, period.
Yeah, and maybe listing the policy.
Yeah.
As noted.
CGAP.
Yeah.
I think that's listed.
On these two, we're thinking maybe just maybe a little bit more digging and then coming back to it next time.
Do that.
Yeah.
Revisions,
Yeah, so I definitely don't see any major disagreement about this, just what's the best way to go.
Yeah.
Great. Excellent. And then VERP and retirement, we're gonna move that to next week. I don't know if do you know if John's gonna be available next week?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. All right, that brings us to proposals and a couple discussion items.
I'm disconnected.
And we did finally get, this 10th that we moved to the 7th update on the website. Kind of forgot about that until this week.
Oh, yeah.
So the website is now correct with all the dates. All right. So we have a few items to bring to you all today. If I turn it on, it would work better. Perfect. And our first one is SPED Professional Council Subcommittee. And we mentioned in our overview of our negotiations letter, this data we wanted to kind of come back. So it's important to remind ourselves of the why. As we looked at our most recent SPED survey, we had 49% of the SPED licensed certified personnel who completed the survey said they are planning on staying in their job next year. We had 8% saying they're planning on leaving, and then we had 42.8, so about 43% saying they were looking at other options. So we know that shortages system-wide are a concern, but we know that we are feeling particularly tight nationally in the state, and I think even Olathe in our SPED personnel. So when we ask them the things that could be changed to make them stay, the top line items were reduction of caseload and workload. Clearly that has financial implications, which I think if we all could snap our fingers and have money to do all the things we need to do, then we wouldn't be sitting here for that. Support with behaviors. Okay, obviously there can be a money element to that, but maybe some other things that wouldn't be a money element. And then of course, increased pay for additional work. We've got some work to do there, but we gotta get some help from the State House too on that one. So what we'd like to really focus on right now is the creation of a professional council subcommittee, because this would allow people at all different levels in our organization Those are the district level, who are involved in SPED, along with those people who are, in the classrooms daily with our students from CDR, from autism, from resource, from gifted, being able to get a good diversity of people, to vet ideas, to kind of think through implications, because something might sound like a great idea and a simple fix for something. And then you get the person who, is running that program in a particular school that has other elements going on, and they can kind of bring to light, hey, this particular issue or this particular solution, here's a couple things we need to iron out. Really would love that subcommittee to review data from surveys, hiring retention data, previous studies that have been done. I know we had a few years ago the SPED study that had just a ton of great information on changes that we can make in our system to improve some of our processes. And then overall, we want to acknowledge that when we're talking about creating a subcommittee for professional counsel, obviously that does focus on issues that are SPED personnel faced daily, but finding some solutions to their challenges can help everybody in our system, because similar to SPED funding, that funding or lack of funding impacts the whole system. So in this case, some of those stressors, some of that tightness impacts the operations of our buildings. So that's kind of our proposal on the SPED subcommittee. We'd really like to kind of move forward with you all and like craft a charge together, but we're also happy to draft something and bring it to the table. We wanted to approach this item as what we can kind of do together in trying to solve some of these challenges that are not necessarily unique to Olathe. They're challenges that we're seeing nationwide, but we want to make sure that we can find solutions that work here in Olathe. I think if I remember correctly, that was all I had on the SPED subcommittee.
Have we ever had like a teacher subcommittee just based on teachers? Does that make sense? Like usually it's more, how does it, am I saying that correctly? Would that cause any?
Yeah,
I don't know if we've ever had this.
Kind
That
of,
makes
because
sense.
I think what you're kind of getting at is like, we have an
Professional
elementary committee, but this is just a specialized group, not a level.
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, like our committees, like I think you're saying, Tricia, are all based in a charge surrounding policy. This would be a real change
Yeah.
from what every other subcommittee
Yes, thank you.
is kind of charged with. That was kind of my first thought too, was do we need to have a specialist subcommittee? Do we need to have a secondary, how do we?
Well,
how
we do have
navigate?
we do have the level subcommittees.
Right.
But I do see that this is different in that leveled subcommittees do focus on a certain portion of our staff. This would be cutting up the pie in a different way to focus on a challenge, a pretty significant challenge that we see in our system. Because looking at some of these issues through the lens of levels, that could be maybe another way of looking at it. But you're not looking at SPED-wide issues, you're looking at SPED issues just by level, which there could be some benefit to that as well. So.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, we've gotten a lot of feedback from SPED teachers about changes they would like to see. So
I
As
guess
by
my
bringing
thought would
that-
be that would be something you all could bring forward then, rather than maybe creating a subcommittee that is just acutely focused on that, because we would be talking about people that aren't on our that aren't sitting on professional council, because none of us are in SPED. So that would be my other concern is, how does this become a conduit in getting reported back here?
we could always invite somebody from the committee. Right, we've had other guests come in to present on
We have a workers' comp.
workers' comp and benefits. and things. I think the SPED departments in each of the buildings are so small and isolated, and there's so many different areas, like one SPED teacher to the other, like they have different needs, that giving them a space to be able to discuss those. And I mean, what they're feeling does affect the rest of the building. I think it would be beneficial to hear from that perspective as well. In a way, because when we think about levels, when we try to think about all of the factors, but there's things beyond what we know of, because none of us are in this world. So that's a blind side. And then, I mean, looking at the data, and in the past few years, we've done a lot to try to retain those folks. And if this is what they're asking for, that's another, this is a no cost ask, right? Like this is.
Well, I would agree with that. There's a significant cost when it comes to whomever the administrators are on the sped side. of
That's
things
fair.
that we have to now commit. Because I'll be honest, when we talk about subcommittees, the work of the subcommittee is really headed by the administrator that's on that committee. Like when we talk about the ECAS committee and some of those things, it's typically, you know, the HR administrator that does kind of the organization and the prepping, and if there's data that wants to be collected, that takes time for those administrators to gather. So that would be another piece that I would think we need to kind of think through, is what are we asking in terms of commitment from people that aren't sitting right here.
I guess the question I would have is like, talking about the difference in building to building, I mean, bring one person from every building to the department, that can be pretty large, pretty quick, obviously, and so I just don't know how that.
And we have to probably
How
not look at it as a, you're representing the building, it probably has to be you're representing
Programs.
a program. Yeah, so we would have to think the way that we build those would have to look a little bit.
But then I would also assume we would want representation from related service too, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean,
Still
yeah.
could get.
Yeah,
really-
absolutely, because sped is such a diverse world in many ways. The realities of people in sped, their day-to-day realities can look very different. But even with that, there are some common things that I think we could dig into and come up with some solutions that would be more balanced in terms of having the different perspectives, the administrator perspective. Well, here's why this solution sounds great from those of you in the classroom. Here's why it doesn't really work as well from the administrator side because of something that we would have a blind eye to, for example.
The one thing I thought of when talking about like how big the committee, when we had the elementary plan time committee, we were a very large committee because we had to have all areas of specialists from multiple buildings and grade level. So that was a committee that was able to do efficient work. That was a pretty hefty group of people.
And it was a focus committee that doesn't necessarily continue to meet based on a particular, issue or goal. And that'd be kind of my recommendation, not that sped issues will ever go away, but like maybe we could focus on a couple of things, but that committee wouldn't necessarily be one that just like meets every month because that's what we do, right? Like it would be focused on a particular charge.
Help me maybe with an example of like where it said a lot of creative perception, that idea, like what would be one of those ideas that brought out?
I'm so glad you asked. So one example would be a couple years ago, we did some really good work in the our sped educators, and we did some work in getting in the agreement, the language about like unscheduled needs that, and it's not just for sped teachers, but sped teachers are often those impacted by that. And one of the things that we're running into, and we kind of went over with the sped administrators in our data, is that accessing really what sped teachers want is they want their plan time, they want their lunch, but they understand like when the student is having some needs, like that's what they're going to do. So there's a process to kind of go through to identify like, okay, when the student's having a meltdown or what have you, here are the people that you try to tag first before you miss your lunch, your plan time. So that that sounds great on paper. But we have a whole bunch of people in in our schools, including our administrators, they are overcommitted, they are overscheduled, they have too many things going on. So what seems to be happening is that we're not able to get everybody who's missing their lunch or their plan because of some unscheduled need, because of the communication on, okay, so what is the process that we go through in this building? So we have some language that is a fantastic start, but we still have quite a few of our sped educators that aren't able to access that. So being able to come together and being like, how could we talk about that particular policy? And yeah, we could do that here. And some of us have some unique insight, right, into that. But not all of us do. Having a subcommittee would maybe be able to get the people in the room together that are, really entrenched in this and say, okay, could we adjust that language slightly? Because I don't think the intent of the language is necessarily to keep people from being compensated for the time that
Are
they
you
don't
saying they
have.
don't know where to go to get compensated?
There,
or-
the survey results had quite a few different pieces. They don't know how. They think they're gonna be denied, so they don't do it, or they were denied, and I can pull that data out and provide that to you. But like,
I'm
there are
just
some,
curious.
yeah, there are some barriers there. So we have some good language to start with that maybe needs some tweaks, but I don't know if we necessarily, and our organizing team could absolutely come with language, but what we're missing there is we're missing the administrator side to be able to say, okay, so that sounds great, but here's on this end how that doesn't work. Because truly, I think we're in a system where everybody wants the same thing. It's just we all have such different perspectives that getting there is a real challenge. Absolutely.
So-
Yeah.
So much better. That helps us understand.
Cause my simple risk, what I am sitting here thinking is, well, I hope if that was happening, that they would go to their building principal and ask. Like, hey, I got called and had to go and cover, and so I missed how do I go about?
I think the issue right now is that so many of those folks particularly are a little bit on an island. So having more of a organized way for the group of sped educators and the group of administrators that kind of relate to that, to have some of those conversations would prevent us from having problems that even come here. Because like Angie was saying, there may be language in the agreement. They're like, I didn't know that was in there. Let's talk about coming up with how we work through that a little bit.
Second discussion topic is kindergarten enrollment night, which is coming up.
So we were going to, when we brought this forward, we were talking about how there was the change where early childhood staff their hours have shifted on those days because they don't have early childhood students. And so their hours have been shifted to match the kindergarten teachers whose hours have been shifted so that they are extra hands and people to assist with kindergarten enrollment. But we found that there's no specific language related to the change in the work hours in the agreement. And so we aren't wanting to change anything about the process. We think it's extremely helpful, especially because a lot of those early childhood educators already have kind of a understanding of some of those kiddos who might be going into that building's kindergarten program. And so we were just wanting to be able to put language into the agreement that would kind of reflect that so that there's not confusion. If say there's an early childhood educator who gets hired, they'll know right away in the agreement, this is a part of what I do, and then preventing any future grievances from maybe miscommunication or not having it in the agreement. anything I missed there.
No, I mean, I think, as we look at our agreement, I don't know if there's necessarily one right place that could go. I don't know if this is something that would be a policy committee thing. We just thought we would bring it here and see if, there's appetite to getting, like I said, maybe the policy committee is a good place to put this and to bring something back. Absolutely, our side can bring back a specific proposal. But we thought we would kind of get your input on thoughts. I know that the secondary, the high school, scheduling document does have some language about like modifying contract time based on like a building need. That's not really exactly the model because it's not a building need, it's a district-wide thing. So perhaps the elementary scheduling document is where it would go. But I don't think any of us on our side have a particular, it has to go here, it has to say this. We're not trying to keep what's happening from happening. We just want it to be codified.
So we didn't have any specific language that we were bringing forward today. We just wanted to kind of see if you had any thoughts related to this before we dug in and potentially brought something forward.
As far as kindergarten. Yeah.
Yeah.
So last year, was the first year that they had early childhood teachers help support during kindergarten enrollment.
When we say
And that was from
kindergarten
when
enrollment, we're talking
The
about.
April 10th, 1 o'clock to 6 o'clock, where families have to sign up. They are on a schedule, it's district wide, and
Yeah.
now we do, everything is very similar across the board. So everybody has the same experience
Yeah.
when they come to kindergarten enrollment, whether it's at this school or this school. So because early child didn't have classes and kindergarten teachers don't have classes,
Yeah.
their schedule was modified a little bit to support that 1 o'clock to 6 o'clock time. But I think kindergarten teachers always, whether they came all day, like I remember I used to pay them a stipend for staying longer. Well, now it's just kind of adjusting their day to get their hours in. Bringing in early childhood has now added, because that's different than their contract time. Does that make sense? Yeah. So usually we just say, come and make up your, for your hours and then that's it. Ish, yeah. So yeah. And again, this is, I think, this is the only second year that we brought in early childhood, and like Kim has asked them, like, this is where you need to be, and we're using them to, so yeah, so it's really just that second year. But they don't have classes either. I caution, like, cause I caution putting in times.
I do, right.
Just because you just never, like. I mean, I would say you could put something in with like, hey, your work day might be adjusted to meet the needs of kindergarten enrollment. For your early childhood and kindergarten teachers, because they don't have students. I think that's expected in a sense, like, hey, you're not supervising students, but yet you do go past your day.
There's just the thought of an early childhood educator would work 8:15 to 4:15, and then they would leave at 4:15 because they're working their contract hours as according to the agreement. But then there are people expecting them to be there until 6. But right now, our agreement says they could leave at 4:15 because that's the end of their contract.
But we don't
time.
want them to on that
Right,
day.
so
Yeah.
that's just why we want to like create some sort of more general.
Yeah, I think
And then we can
hearing
figure
you
out
think
where-
aloud was really helpful,
Yes.
honestly.
Yeah.
Because, if we put 1 to 6, it ends up being 1:30 to 6:30 one year, then we,
Right.
yeah,
I mean, I totally get the wanting to be clear and,
yes.
make sure people know, but also don't want us committed to
Not
something.
super
that-
Being,
Yeah,
being,
right,
being specific in the day.
Yeah, yeah. Be very, very specific about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, I was walking, looking at it, I'm like, there's something in here.
Yeah, to me, I was like, there's gotta be something. Okay, so, yeah, no, I
Got
appreciate
it.
that gives us some ideas. of stuff. Okay. Well, we appreciate you, being able to have a little flexible discussion time on those two. Sometimes mini heads are better than.
And I do
Just one.
think based on the feedback from last year, it was extremely helpful to those buildings. So
Yeah.
again, like
It all went.
in my building, we have a lot of obviously there are kids who go to a different building for early childhood than their homeschool. But it's exciting for those specific kiddos to like see a
see a
face
face
they
they know,
recognize
yeah.
and just add to that positive experience. So I think it's a really positive change, so.
We'll go ahead and move on with, our next proposal. I think Laura was gonna start with some
Yeah, I'm
celebration.
so excited that I get to talk about PTO a little bit. The staff love it. Love our new policy overall. We have just a few points of tension, like blackout days. There's a little complexity in the system. I know. But we wanted to baby step into those by, just proposing some exemptions for using PTO first, and I'll get there in a minute, but I just want to share some things that work. So, overall, many educators are saying they love the flexibility. It feels freeing to them, and they're being treated professionally and with dignity. And I just really love that statement. One of my colleagues said that this is the first time in 25 years that he feels like he's being treated as a professional when it comes to time off, which is that 25 years. That's pretty amazing. We're in a good place. Another colleague said that she feels respected as a responsible human and employee. So just well done. Kudos to us last year for coming together and making that happen. I mean, it's just pretty awesome. I also think we have some shared interests, and I just wanted to highlight those. Definitely mental health. We're encouraging teachers to take care of themselves so that they can be present for students, colleagues, and that PTO program supports that for sure. And then also teacher retention. So we're just the best in the area. So
Best in the state.
yes, in the
We are.
wide area. So the best in the state for sure. Yeah, we want to talk about exempting using PTO first for a few things, starting with FMLA and non-FMLA medical leave. We'd like educators to feel some relief when they're experiencing health challenges, knowing that they don't have to use their PTO first for those. And then also create some equity, because if an educator has a health event in the fall and all of their PTO is used, then they don't have that available in the spring. Whereas if a teacher has a health event in spring, maybe they've already used their PTO and taken a couple days to visit their kid at college or whatever. And then we'd also like to propose that we exempt childbirth and adoption leave from using PTO first as well. So, and we feel like districts, surrounding districts are adopting more generous proposals in terms of parental leave policies, and this would be a good step in that direction. So. And I think there's some other language.
Oh, yeah,
To
Yes.
change a little bit in the actual policy. So, Angie, were you
Yeah,
gonna
we're
speak to
not
that?
as good at doing all the drafts as Chris, so apologies. You're looking for pink or green, depending on if it was edited in Word or. You'll notice on page 27, that is what Laura just spoke to, is go ahead and outlining those specific exemptions. And then on page 28, just modifying that language to allow employees to be able to take the accumulated illness bereavement leave before using paid time off or I guess vacation leave. And then on page 29, which is the top of the page, because then I was like, this is going to be really, really long. You'll notice it has under childbirth adoption leave. And then of course, non-FMLA, just the changes that would be required to allow taking the accumulated illness bereavement leave first. Okay. Then once we started getting to that point, you and I connected a little bit about guess we missed that. A couple of those, so these will look very
Yeah.
familiar to you.
Yeah.
The rest of the document is more cleanup.
Clean up.
And
We
I
thought we
was,
got all of the.
yeah, we thought we got them all, and I think there might have been one or two others that I found, so.
The personal business leave. and the
Yeah.
MS
So I just skipped page 30, that's why that's in yellow, and went down to donor leave. And under donor leave, which goes to the next page, you'll notice we just missed a reference to personal business leave. So that is more just editorial fixing. And then we didn't find anything for a couple of pages, so skipping to page 32 with military leave, same kind of basic cleanup. Political activity leave, this is where we switched to Google Docs, and that's why it's green. So same kind of idea there. And then there were a couple kind of weird ones that were in the leave policy but referred to leave. So those are at the end because they weren't in the leave policy. But on the last page, there's one from page 15 on the consulting or training outside of the district. And it had a reference to personal leave. If you are denied professional leave request, it says that you use personal leave, which of course we don't have anymore. So that's just correcting that information. And then sequence of coverage, this is from a different policy on page 49. Same idea, is it has a reference to personal business leave. So those two aren't in the leave policy, but I thought I would put it all in here so that maybe we wouldn't have to deal with it later.
One of the, I always feel like I'm a negative Nancy, but I'm always have to think of all of the repercussions. I think one of the things I worry about in going to, you don't have to use your PTO before, as you go on FMLA or any kind of childbirth or adoption leave, is the difference between that versus before when we had personal leave was that the significant difference in the number of days. We were talking about 2 days, now we're talking about 15 to 18 days. And so to think about being able to be gone for a length of time because of something that's obviously out of your control or sometimes in your control, but and then still have 15 to 18 days, like that's a significant number of days. So I would want for us to have a chance to kind of talk through and think about maybe that you don't have to exhaust all of them, but you could reserve a couple. I know I've had some experience where that was kind of how we designed that policy, because I do understand, you can have something happen and you have to be gone for a length of time because you've got something serious going on with your health or you have a baby. But also know that after that event, you may still have a need to be gone for something.
With a childhood field trip.
Yeah, right. Or, I do think about the person that has a baby and then, okay, that baby may not be healthy for the next remainder of the school year. And now I don't have any paid leave left. So I think those are things we can kind of toss around and think about. But I certainly appreciate the continued discussion about, and I'm glad to hear PTO has been a good thing. I felt like we've heard that too. So that's awesome.
Well, I know we had talked about at some point, and now that we're getting into, we're not quite at crunch time yet in negotiations, but it's gonna come quickly, right?
Yeah.
We had talked about, being able to review some data,
Yeah.
like on PTO, because it is the first year.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's any data related to this
Yeah.
that might be relevant for us to think about. 'Cause I think we all have a shared interest in making sure people do have some leave when the bad thing happens after the bad thing.
Well, the other thing I will just say, just so it's kind of on the record, is that, not only do we have the most generous PTO leave, when you look at our leave options, when we talk about any extended leaves, you won't find a fraction anywhere else.
We have 15 different types.
Yes, I mean, to have something like non-FML qualifying leave does not exist anywhere. And so I think we need to really think about that, and I would want your help in making sure staff understand that, because it's a little disheartening when we hear that, we don't have enough leave, or, we aren't given, kind of these additional perks as professionals, because that's just not the case. But I think this is something we can absolutely kind of go back and talk as a team about, and I'd be happy to bring back some PTO data in terms of looking at some comparisons from last year to this year. I know all of our big questions was, are we gonna have 4 times the number of absences that we had
Right.
last year? And I can tell you that hasn't been the case, so that's great.
That's great. That's good.
Now, I don't want to say that because we have to get through April and May.
Yeah, I was saying.
Maybe. There's absences last, yesterday or something, but I don't think that's the case. But I'll be happy to bring that back, and then we could have some time to kind of go through this.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
That'd be
and
great.
I think a couple things to remember with this, like in thinking about your person who then comes back and now they have a bunch of days.
Yeah.
Is first, if they've got a bunch of days accumulated that they spent, they have accumulated those days.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not like we're pulling them out of nothing.
Right.
And we also have the firewall still of the 3 or more days in a row, 5 or more days in a row kind of thing.
Yeah, that is
Where
true.
those would be
Yeah.
still kind of. protected.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. No,
I
those
was
are great.
gonna say one thing, I think a good step that we've made this year is, somewhere in third quarter, whenever that was, we did a professional development opportunity for anyone in the district where we presented and gave information. And we went through all 13 different types of leave.
We needed
So-
12 hours. We had one.
We were able
Yeah.
You did it fun, that's
One. Yeah.
But it was a positive first step in us, because there are definitely lots of employees out there who have questions.
Yeah.
And they felt like it was a easier way to come ask questions
Yeah.
than maybe emailing someone. And so
Well, thank you
I
for
know
doing
we're
that.
hoping to do that again, hopefully.
Yeah, we had one person that was like, oh, I didn't know it was something about grandparent leave.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, I could have done that. So, educating people on the contract, I think it's gonna always be a challenge, and it's a positive thing that we can do that.
And honestly, the only place where I'm hearing negative things is from people who are just really negative.
Yeah, I mean, like truly, yeah. And even the on-base system, I'll just shout out to on-base, whoever, it's very easy.
It is. You just have to know where the link is.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
a challenge.
black pay exception.
I would love to figure out an easier workflow. On the teacher end, having to put it in so many places, and I
Right.
can't imagine on the other end.
Yeah, it's all manual on the back end. So, we're now in the phase with Oracle of kind of getting to, okay, what kinds of fixes do we need to make, and where can we do some kind of perfecting, if you will? And so that's one of the things on our list is, okay, we need to kind of start going down that path to figure out if there's something that could make that a little easier on the HR side of things, but it's been good. Yeah. So, thank you.
We've got one last. There we go. One last thing for today.
This is, and we've got the language again, but this is actually a proposal that will be very familiar to you because it is substantively identical to what we presented and talked a little bit about last year. And this is again discussing the possibility of the district matching some amount of 403B contributions for employees. And then there's a vesting schedule that goes along with that, so that they wouldn't get vested to be employee right away, but that over time those contributions could be matched. Our proposed policy is $50 per month, and there's a couple of different reasons why we still think that this is an important thing to discuss. I know when we talked about this last year, there was some conversation that the legislature might make some moves with KPERS 3, and that bill was introduced and then got a hearing and then sort of died. So I know there've been some small changes that have at least made it over the hump in KPERS 3, but it's still, it is not a great solution for our folks who are in that collection in KPERS 3. So trying to find some ways to help them be better prepared for retirement. Another piece that we thought was important, and obviously want to make sure John checks our work on this, but this is an area where it's not just a strict dollar for dollar, look how much this costs the district, because that money is, our understanding is that's not subject to the same payroll taxes once you are doing the contribution matching. So there may be a little bit of a force multiplier, if you will, on some of that money that might be helpful. The vesting schedule helps us retain great educators in those first several years potentially, and would also, of course, we have an interest in our educators being able to, sustain themselves through their whole lifespan, and this certainly trying to contribute to that. There are a couple, I can't remember.
Answer to that right off the top of our head.
Piper, I think Piper was the nearby one that we were using as kind of the model for a lot of this language.
I
Yeah.
was gonna say, it felt like they were both
Yeah.
in that direction.
Yeah. Yeah, we wouldn't be the first. Do they?
Yeah. Is that new? Okay, interesting. Well,
Yeah.
You mean they're not? Yeah. Right there.
Yeah, understood.
Might all not be back next
Estimating the
week.
cost because you don't have.
Right.
Yeah, I think so.
Bar-ish area. Just a lot of people who are contemplating. But if we keep
Just don't know if waiting for good news from the best option.
when you talk about hiring brand new educators or employees of any kind, do they understand the importance of, beginning immediately?
Yeah, which you could say if you hire them. So first of all, do short-term disability.
Yeah.
Second of all, even if it's $25 a month,
Right.
start now.
And don't use all your days because if something happens,
Mhm.
you feel like you have to go into mall mode.
Yeah.
It'd be like an exit.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and speaking of that, I'm so happy to hear you did some on leave because it is really confusing and the number of people, all of us, myself included, that don't understand that FMLA is not paid leave.
Right.
When you get to where you need that, and you're like, oh, wait, that doesn't,
That's not paid.
oh my gosh, I can't afford to take,
Yeah.
this many days off.
It's particularly shocking when you have somebody who's about ready to give birth and like, it's not paid. It's too late now. That's it. All right, we'll be back April 1st. No joke. No joke. Same bat time, same bat channel.
What's our theme gonna be?
As a former high school teacher, I don't do Okay, yeah, well,
They
yeah,
have a
we'll,
deferred compensation plan, but it is not a match.
it's not a match, okay, yeah, so we can look into that.
They identified a specific carrier. I knew they had gone through that work.
Okay.
And identifying so that you could have it, deducted payroll.
Okay. All right. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you all for your time.
Yeah, thanks. Good to see everybody.
Yeah. Good to get going on things. See you soon.
That Monday is the first Monday.
I think it's.
Is it? Cut out.